Alright, what's going on, guys? I said a while back that Elden Ring was going to be one of these games where we keep finding things for years to come that we didn't know or didn't notice that still somehow impresses us with the level of detail and artistic craft that FromSoftware continues to put out. And today's video is one of those. And I gotta say, I am very surprised that we're still finding stuff like this. And so as you guys continue to send me this stuff, I'm gonna keep putting out these videos. So do me a favor and hit that subscribe button as we get into it today. At the time of me recording this, the channel is right on the edge of 50k, and that is honestly so crazy to me. But with all that out of the way, let's get into it. The first discovery today comes from my friend Eridan, whose channel I'm sure all you guys are familiar with by now. He's been doing a full lore through of Elden Ring that I can't recommend enough, but something that he came across during that lore through involves the sealed doors of Leyndell. While patrolling the streets of the capital, you're going to come across these doors that are sealed shut with this golden substance. Now, when you see these, it's going to raise a question. Why are they sealed shut? Is it to keep something out, or is it to keep something in? And a common theory that I've seen going around a few times is that the doors were sealed with corpse wax to protect the citizens during the wars with the dragons. However, that may not be the case, as also throughout the capital you can find doors that aren't sealed at all. The reality of why these doors are sealed shut may be a play on a Japanese tradition called Kintsugi. Kintsugi is a meditative art form of taking things that have been shattered and putting them back together more beautifully with gold. It's supposed to invoke a thought of reflection that even things that are broken and cracked can be made beautiful again. And I think when it comes to Leyndell, this makes perfect metaphorical sense. Even looking at it from a lore perspective, that is essentially what's going on at Leyndell. After the shattering, Mohg is desperately trying to hold together the tradition of the worship for the Erd Tree, putting everything back together with gold, even though the world around him is falling apart. And I think that connection there is really cool. Another interesting metaphorical detail that Eridan pointed out to me, albeit maybe a bit coincidental, involves the god-devouring serpent. And this is something I never noticed but always had a bit of a question about. Did you ever take the time to look at the way the god-devouring serpent is coiled up? It's not coiled like a snake at all. It instead looks much closer to a closed fist. You can see the 4 potential fingers and the thumb curling backwards, which looks like it may be very painful for an average snake to make, but with all the hand symbolism going on in the game, it could prove to be an interesting metaphor, because the symbology for a closed fist typically comes in the form of signaling power. And if you're familiar with Rykard's story, a lust for power is the central theme, and that is the very thing that the god-devouring serpent gave to him. So again, that might be a coincidence, but then again, you know how FromSoftware likes to include stuff like that, so it might also be an interesting detail, but make of it what you will. Up next, we have a really cool gameplay feature that I bet you didn't know about. This is one of those ultra-specific moments that's probably only going to happen to a handful of people, and even then you might not notice it. But did you know that there is a secret death animation when you die while jumping from a headshot by an arrow? Now, like I said, the chances that this actually happens to you are so low, like maybe only a handful during an entire playthrough, and personally it wouldn't even be something I would question. But this is a different animation than the standard headshot death, and I believe only happens while jumping. Now, someone did point out in the comments that this may be the same animation as the headshot death from Dark Souls 3, so if someone in the comments can verify that, that would be cool to know. And it really makes me want to go looking for even more ultra specific details just like that one. But while we're on the topic of arrows, here's a little bonus one. Did you know that the Spinning Strike's Ash of War can actually block arrows? Because I definitely didn't. Now, I don't know why exactly this works like it does. I tried all the other spinning Ashes of War, and apparently this is the only one that does it. It may be that the arrow is colliding with the halberd, but honestly on this one, your guess is as good as mine. Now, here's a really interesting lore discovery that really had me thinking, and it's about a lot of interesting connections between Renalla's Great Rune and the potential Great Rune that Miquella was supposed to have, and there's a lot to dissect here. It begins with the similarities between Renalla's Great Rune and Malenia's Great Rune, because they're essentially the same shape, but as we know, Malenia's Great Rune is corrupted by the Scarlet Rot, and since we don't ever see Miquella's Great Rune, it could reason that since they were twins, Miquella and Malenia's Great Rune may have been the same shape, but that's just the surface level. When we dig into the lore perspective of this, it does go kinda deep. We know, at least from what we have in the game, Miquella's story revolves around him undergoing a metamorphosis to become a full god. He was the twin of Melania, but was born with a curse to forever remain a child. However, despite that, he was still regarded as the most fearsome Empyrean. His knowledge and prowess was so deep that he was able to craft his own Halig tree, a credible rival to the Erd tree, but was kidnapped by Mohg when he placed himself inside the tree within a cocoon to one day be reborn. Now let's consider Renalla's Great Rune. Renalla's Great Rune is the Great Rune of the Unborn, specializing in the act of rebirth, and it was a gift granted to her by Radagon to signify their marriage. But here's where a lot of holes start to pop up. Technically, this would have happened before Miquella was even born. As we know, Miquella and Melania were children of Radagon and Queen Marika, and we do actually have Miquella's Great Rune from some cut files, and it was supposed to be known as the Great Rune of Abundance. However, we do know Radagon also had a fascination with Miquella, and for him to possess a Great Rune to give as a gift to Renalla raises some interesting questions on its own. So while Miquella's Great Rune might not be the exact one that we see in Renalla's Amber Egg, it could in theory have the same origin through Radagon and be the same shape in the completed Elden Ring. But for the ultimate question of why Renalla's Great Rune is the same shape as Melania's is definitely a call for more investigation. This next discovery comes from another fellow YouTuber, Amir, who is super knowledgeable about all the technical inner workings of Elden Ring. But have you ever noticed that in PvP sometimes your weapon appears to randomly miss and swing in a direction that you completely did not intend? Even though somebody may be right in front of your face, your weapon can still be swung way over their head or to their side in a way that is definitely not intended by the attack's standard path. I've had this happen to me a few times and it is extremely frustrating to say the least, but this is due to something called aim punch, which is basically a system of knockback or stun when you receive poise damage from an attack. Now, previous Souls games have had this feature in the past, but Elden Ring's is a bit different. It appears to be completely janky in comparison and not acting the way it was intended, which can result in some insane movements like you're seeing on screen. And it's just another piece of the puzzle of why Elden Ring's PvP is in such dire need of help, because there's so many things that are just not correct. So I promise if you thought your weapon was supposed to hit somebody and it completely didn't, you're not crazy, it's just kind of a broken system at the moment. Next, I want to talk about a really interesting lore note. One of the major conflicts in the story of Elden Ring is about who is going to be the god of the new age, and we have a few contenders vying for that role. There's Queen Marika, who is currently the god and host of the Elden Ring, Miquella, who is trying to be reborn into that status as we talked about earlier, and then we have Mohg trying to bring about his own dynasty with the help of an outer god called the Formless Mother. But there's an interesting detail with the enemy placement in these areas that makes Mohg's story kind of sad. The Oracle Envoys, the little snowball trumpet players that we can find around the world, are said to appear when a new god or a new age is about to emerge. And so when we look at the placement of them, it reveals some interesting details. We can find them in Leyndell near the Erd tree and near Queen Marika, and we can find them in Miquella's Halig tree, showing us that Miquella is a real candidate to be the god of the new age. But interestingly enough, the one place we don't see them is in Mohgwyn Palace, showing us that even the oracles don't believe Mohg is a real candidate and know that his age and his dynasty will never come. And the slightly sad part is that when we defeat Mohg, he still believes in the potential of his dynasty. Now this next one's pretty cool and I had no idea about this. Around the lands between, you come across these giant bats. They're one of the more annoying enemies in the game, but if you manage to kill them and they land on their back, you'll notice the really intricate pattern on the inside of their wings. It kind of looks like fire, but it also kind of looks like something you'd see on a butterfly's wings. And all of these giant bats you find across Elden Ring have this same pattern, except for 3. If you meander around Stargazer's ruins and the mountaintops of the giants, you'll come across these 3 bats on the side of the cliff. On the surface, they appear to be the same as the other ones further up, except they're not, and these guys are a lot tougher. But if you manage to take them down despite their large health pool, you can notice that these tougher bats have a different pattern on the bottom of their wings. It's sort of a red, black, and yellow, and personally, I'm pretty unsure of what the meaning behind this symbolism is. What's weird is that this appears to be the only group of bats with this pattern on their wings, and I do find it strange that this is only 3 out of hundreds in the rest of the game. So if one of you knows the reasons behind this, definitely let me know in the comments down below. But to further add to the topic of the cool animals of the lands between, a few videos ago we talked about the Miranda flowers potentially being the warped versions versions of the Erdtree Guardians we find in front of the minor Erdtrees. And here's a little addition to the idea that Miranda flowers were once people. If you get lucky, the little Miranda sprouts that we find can actually have the bonus runes that manifest in the creature's eyes, but on the Miranda sprouts, it appears on the end of their anthers. So is this where the eyes of the people that turned into them reside? I'll leave that up to you to discern. But to finish off the video today, did you know that the two fingers are actually mushrooms? Well, I didn't until about a week ago. I always wondered why they looked the way they did, all patchy and gross, but it seems that their appearance is actually based on a fungus called the dead man's fingers. This appearance is almost uncanny to what we see in game, but I promise you this connection goes much deeper than simply looking like the mushroom. And if you want to see this idea explored further, my last video goes down a giant rabbit hole of why I believe Elden Ring is actually about mushrooms. And I promise it's not as crazy as it sounds, it actually makes a lot of sense. So I'd recommend going ahead and giving that a watch. But I hope I was able to show you something today that you didn't already know, and if I did, do me a favor and leave a like on the video. I'm gonna keep this series going as long as I can and as long as you guys watch it, but if you have a discovery that you think should be featured on here, be sure to join the Discord that I'll have linked in the pinned comment below. But aside from all that, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and follow me over on Twitter, and I'll catch you in the next one.